I just want to give you guys an update on what's going on with the merger process at this point with New Hill and New Life churches here in Medina. The ballots have been sent out to our voting members, and we are awaiting their return to the office so that those ballots can be counted. Later on this week, I believe Rick is going to be sending out another letter that's going to be putting down a deadline for those, and it should be sometime in the next week or so we can have some time to get them in and get them counted, hopefully before the 31st. I would encourage you, if you haven't made a decision on those things, to certainly continue to pray on whichever way the Lord might be leading you in this, and then please get those in as soon as possible, because we do know with the situation with the COVID right now that the mail service is being delayed just a bit. So we're looking forward to seeing which way things go with that. Over the past several days, we've had some questions that have propped up from some of our members. Mainly some things that people wanted some clarification on. One of the things is why are we moving so fast with this, with all that's going on with this process? Why are we doing it in the midst of this coronavirus outbreak, pandemic thing that we're dealing with? Well, the thing about it is we're really trying to during this period of time we've slowed down a bit from where we were. I know originally so there were some rumors saying that we were going to have this done by the end of March, and that was when things were just announced things in the beginning of March, I think, somewhere in there, where we were talking about it and saying, and that was just unrealistic. There was just no way that was going to happen. There's no way that we were going to be able to do that. So that was just a false rumor that kind of got out there. But where we are now, at the end of, or approaching the end of May, we've had some time to work through some things. So the speed of this is really not something that we're really so much concerned with, but the process of going through this and saying, are we doing everything in a right way, in an orderly way, in a way that gives the members of our church a chance to process the information, to think about it, to pray about it, to talk with one another and consider whether or not this is the direction we as a church want to go. How did this all come about? Why did things happen the way they did? That's a good question, but I can speak to you as to how it all started from my perspective. Basically, back in August was when I began working back in a secular job, taking a contract doing some software engineering for a place up in Middleburg Heights. And at that point was when we came to an arrangement with the church where I was going to be bivocational, and have been since August. It was in November when I got hired on to a permanent position at a place out in Norwalk that really I started thinking about and considering what are the next steps, what are the next phases for this church? How do we pray about this? How do we think about this now that at that point in November we were starting to see that the finances at the church were becoming more the foundation of that was developed, and we were in a good spot financially, more so than we have ever been since I've been in Medina for the past 9 years. And we were starting to think about, okay, what does it look like to go forward? What are we going to do to push this mission forward here in Medina? And as I was thinking about that and going through that in my head, say, well, being in this new bivocational role, if we were to develop a team of leaders, we would look to have people that would come alongside, people that would come in and maybe help us with things like the worship team, the kids ministry, maybe even bringing an associate pastor in to help with preaching on Sunday. Different things that we could do to develop a team that can reach this community. And as I was thinking through that and processing that whole option and working through it myself, saying, well, we got to get people from outside of our community. We have to make sure that they are people of good character, who are qualified, who have a desire to be here, who buy into our vision of what it means to be a church here in Medina. And that whole process, it's a big project. And as I was thinking through that and praying about it, one of the things that kind of popped in my mind was, well, there is, I do know that there is one other church here in town that is led by a man who is already here, a small church plant known as New Hill, and Michael Meadows has been leading that church plant for the past several years, and thinking about what's been going on with them and their community as they've been they're getting themselves well established. They were meeting down at the Moose Lodge, and I know the way that the North American Mission Board structures their funding for church plants and a lot of these things, and how it all works out is that at a certain point in time, these churches need to be self-sufficient, and the money that these churches are given, it's on a sliding scale, and eventually the money of support you get, it runs out, and then the churches are on their own. And I, for whatever reason, was thinking, and I knew that Michael and Aubrey were having children, and where they are with their walk and where they are with their development of their church, and thinking about, well, what would it be like? What would be like to consider that these two churches, New Hill and New Life, which are roughly right about the same size, what would it be like for us to consider joining together, joining forces to try to establish a stronger presence in Medina, that our members could combine to work together to help reach the lost here in Medina and Medina County and beyond. It was something it was an intriguing thought. It's something that didn't, I don't think it would be something that I would just come up with on my own, but something that just seemed to be worth considering. So I, in November, right around Thanksgiving, went and made a call, or I don't know, sent a text over to Michael and see if he wanted to meet for coffee, and we got together at Starbucks, and just to ping him for his information, or just for get a feel for where he is in things, and I floated the idea by him, and just wanted to see where he was. A lot of people in church planting circles, they might run from a certain offer like this to come and join in with another church. It might be something that might drag down their momentum, something they don't want to get all encumbered with the logistics of combining cultures, or maybe even maybe sometimes they have certain goals in mind where they say, well, we're doing fine where we are. Why would we want to do something like that? Or they have an intentionality with meeting in a place like the Moose Lodge, which is normally it's a kind of a bar establishment, and maybe they don't want to have a long-term contract or anything set down with being tied down to one location or not. So I was just trying to get an idea from him on where he was and see, was this something that might be worth thinking about. And when he gave me some go-ahead to just say, hey, I'm going to go talk with my elders, since you seem to be interested in at least discussing this idea. I went back to the elders at New Life and floated the idea by them to say, well, is this something that you guys might see as being a beneficial thing for our churches and this community. And I told Michael not to go forward with speaking with anybody else from New Hill until I had spoken with the elders at New Life itself, and met with Rick and Frank individually to talk about that, and they felt it was worth talking about, worth discussing with New Hill, and that was basically where we got into the December realm of things. We set up a joint Christmas Eve service with New Hill and New Life to kind of invite them over to our house, and Michael got to deliver the message that night. We got to meet a lot of new friends, and I thought that went really well. After that, we met as the two leadership teams, the elders from New Life and the leaders from New Hill, starting in January, where we were talking about what would this look like, what would it take to bring these two bodies together, what makes sense. Do we enter into a season of prayer where we said, does the Lord want two churches here in Medina? Does the Lord think, does the Lord think that it would be good to have one stronger church here in Medina? Does he want 10 churches in Medina? We were working through that whole process and came to the conclusion that this is an interesting, intriguing idea. And going through the differences of what we felt, are we so distinctly different from one another that we should remain separate? But as we were going down through the lists of who we are, what we believe, what our ministries are like, how our people interact, what our culture is like, the different things that we saw in there, we saw we were very similar to begin with. And in fact, there are people that are members over at New Hill that used to be over at New Life, and there were people that came and visited New Hill and ended up joining New Life. And so we're looking at this going, well, this is something that we might want to just continue to talk about this as we go. And we laid out a basic plan, a kind of a process of a set of steps that at any point in time any of us could pull out and say we don't think this is a good idea, but we know that from our bylaws as a church we have to take a vote on something as significant as this, as coming together with if there was a change in property, if there's a change in leadership. All these things require votes from our members. So with this process laying forward, we had certain things along the way. We wanted to have Michael come over and preach. We wanted to have they actually wanted to come over and have a little Q&A session with the members of our church so they could introduce themselves to us and answer any questions that people might have and begin the discussion of what it might look like. And we were looking forward throughout the spring to possibly doing a lot of joint activities together so we could get to know one another a lot. When Michael came and preached right there at the end of February, the beginning of March, I think it might have been the first weekend in March, that's when we had the Q&A session there. Then the next week, Rick O'Callahan preached to give me a little break. I went and spent some time with my son up in Michigan. He had some soccer games up there, and we were processing all these things that were going on. And then it was the next week when everything started going south in Ohio due to this corona outbreak. And so the governor had shut down the schools. All those things were happening, and we made the decision as elders to, we want to protect people. We don't want to do something reckless, and we chose to suspend services for those first few weeks of the end of March and then into April, and thought, well, maybe this will be over, and no big deal. We'll see how this goes. And then April came, and the governor continued this lockdown, and the lockdown was we were down in a kind of a tight lockdown at that point, saying you shouldn't be leaving your house, all these recommendations on how you should go about things. We were sent home to work at home at my business. My wife was laid off from her position at Medina Christian Academy because the schools shut down. We're in this thing. We're hearing all kinds of weird things in the beginning of April, mid-April. Saying we're instructed by the governor's office to people that were representatives there that were saying that we should pray that we wouldn't have to go into martial law, that they were unveiling things in a stepped process. They were going to try things, and then it was going to escalate. We didn't know where we were going to end up. We didn't know if we wouldn't be able to meet again until October or November, or even beyond. Who knows? So where we were in April, as we were considering this, saying, what are we going to do with this whole process that we've kicked off? We definitely slowed down. We couldn't really meet together, but we continued to meet online with the leadership at New Hill. And we were doing that through Zoom meetings on Saturday mornings and discussing possibilities. In about middle of April, early to mid-April there, Rick O'Callahan, he came up with this idea because we kept saying, well, we can't even come to it. We can't even have a vote unless we have a meeting. And you can't have a meeting unless people are together. And how do we solve that problem? And so Rick spent some time, going through our bylaws, our handbook, to say, is this something that we could do? And the thing that he came up with was following the model of pretty much a shareholders meeting for people that are across all kinds of distances and whatnot. But you can definitely get business done from a distance, through mail-in ballots. And so we thought about that, we prayed about it, and Rick and I and Frank thought that, well, if we did it the right way and communicated it in a very procedural way, that hopefully we could see and we could get the pulse of the church and say, is this something we want to go forward with? And so that was in the midst of that lockdown. And we developed this process and thought that in the beginning of May we could send out some letters and then send out some ballots following that, and hopefully we can come to a conclusion on this with one way or another on how we want to do this. Now, we get some concerns from people thinking that we're moving too far, we're moving too fast, we're pushing too hard, words like, oh, we just want the rubber, the congregation to rubber stamp this. And that's the farthest from what we want. We don't want to tell you how to vote on this. But we do want you to pray. I want you to know that your vote matters. That together we have bylaws, and we have agreed to doing ministry together in this way, and we are legally bound to do that. But as we're doing this from a distance, I just want to encourage you to take some time to pray. If you need to call your friends and get their ideas on things. The best thing for us, how we usually do things, is to do it in person. And so we can have our questions answered. But due to the nature of our situation, we felt it was okay to proceed in this way, at least put forward the vote. Know this: if you're uncomfortable with the way that we've proceeded, if you don't appreciate how this has all gone down, I understand. I also want you to understand that your feedback is important, and we care about what you care about. No one's trying to force this as an issue. We simply want to see where we are as a church and see because if we do have everyone behind this, we want to take this opportunity right now while we have an empty building, while we have some time, we could actually do a lot of work to prepare. There's been renovations that have been planned. We've got the parking lot project that's been underway. We want to take and leverage this if we can get it done. We didn't want to have to sit there and wait till November or December and just be in limbo in this kind of waiting to see, well, maybe we'll be able to meet. And even if we were able to meet at a certain point, according to our bylaws and do things in that way, we know that where we were in April, that there was a lot of people in the church that were frankly terrified to leave their house. We had people in our own congregation that had coronavirus and told by their doctors that they had it. And even if we would have an official church meeting at that point, it'd be more like, well, can we even get enough people as a representative body to take a real legitimate vote? And so that's why we've kind of gone down this path of doing this by a mail-in vote, and hopefully it hasn't caused you too much stress or concern. We simply want to present this possibility, this proposal to you, so we can get your feedback to know whether we should move forward in this way or not. One of the questions that came up in discussions with people recently was, well, how do I put this? If you wanted to just quit, why didn't you just do that and let us know? If you're just at a point where you're just wanting to step out and you're done, you need help or whatever, why didn't you just let us know? Well, that wasn't the point in the first place. The point in the first place of going down this path was to say, how do we come together? How do we as a church, as New Life, take the next step forward? Some of the things that we've been talking about here is, with this possibility in the specifics of it, has to do with this idea of a merger. With the merger idea, some people are uncomfortable with that, the way we've structured this this joining together of these churches. That when we think about it here, they're saying, well, it sounds more like a takeover than a merger. One of the reasons we proposed it the way we have is because I've shared podcasts with some of the leaders and elders. We've looked at different case studies of things. We've talked with leadership at the Summit Association. I've met with somebody over at North Coast Baptist Association. We talked about, what does this mean? How does this work? We had experience with trying to merge with another church in town early on when I first came in to Medina, and we had some discussions that we found it was very difficult to try to bring in two leadership bodies together, trying to take, well, these are your bylaws and these are our bylaws, and going to have to go through a discussion of, well, which part do we want to keep, how do we want to do this, and trying to do everything like that, and it just was kind of an overwhelming process. In the end, the way we've structured this, the way we've kind of put forward this proposal was to say, well, somebody really, for it to kind of go smoothly, somebody should take the lead, and the other group would come in and come alongside, with New Hill as being a new church plant in town, as they have been developing their culture, their momentum, and their identity within the town. They really didn't want to have to say, well, we've got two churches, we're going to become something new, we're going to change the name to something else. So we didn't want to have New Hill lose momentum in that sense. So I really personally don't care what we call this new church body that plans to meet together. It's really just a name to me. So I was completely fine saying, okay, I don't care what you call it. We'll go with the New Hill, the New Hill name. Then the question came up, well, who's taking the lead? And me going into bivocational ministry at this point, looking at here's Michael, and he has definitely got his ducks in a row there. He's got his leadership team established. I have no problem with stepping down and coming alongside those guys to help out. And so in our process of thinking of these things, how do we as a church come into their church culture? How do we process this all? Say, well, we are eventually going to be one church. Where eventually, if this goes through, it would be one church identity. And whatever we call it, or whoever's bylaws, whoever's rules, and whoever's in the elder board and whatnot, that all's fine. That all work itself out over time. And so we're looking at that. So the intention here isn't just, well, Ted is trying to quit. He's stepping down. No, the intention here is, how do we strategically come together to create a church body, to join together these church bodies as they would come together, and eventually they would meet at 580 North State Road, and in the church building that we have been meeting at for the past several decades. And we would plan as a church body that if we approve this, we are becoming part of this greater church together. So it's not really to think that this is just a move of me just trying to quit. That's not what this is about. One of the question is then, so why are we giving everything up? Why do we give up our name? Why are we signing over our property to them? This is what we've been doing, this is what they've been doing, and the way I've tried to think about that in my own head and to process that is basically this, that I don't own the church. None of our members really own the church. It is the Lord's church. That facility there was built several decades ago. Many of us weren't part of it. There's only a few maybe remaining who maybe like Steve Baker likes to remind us that he was there swinging a hammer in the original building, and that's great. But for us to claim ownership of anything is really some people might be offended by this, but I'm telling you, it's really not my church. It's not our church. It's the Lord's church. When we say we're signing over this and we're giving something up, we're giving these things away to them. Well, the idea isn't that we're giving this away to someone else. The idea is that we are merely going through the formalities of a transaction in which a title, a deed would be put over in the name of the new church, and we plan on being part of that church. We plan on being there on the other side of it, that all of our friends that we've worshiped with for years, all of our friends that we've been together, we've invested our lives in together, we plan on being here on the other side of that if we approve this. So when we go through this this technical thing, a contract and assets and all that being put over in the new church body, we're actually that's only a temporary step. The full step on the other side of it is that we will be part of that church body. We plan on being there together on the other side. So when we sign something over to that church, we're signing it actually over in a big sense to ourselves. That we're giving ourselves a gift. This is a gain for the church in Medina. This is not a giving up. This is not a losing standpoint. This is, what are we gaining with this? We're gaining a greater church in Medina. We're going to have a larger church family, having greater resources for which we can combine together to help disciple children, to help reach out to families in our community all around us, to reach out to those who are in need, to do ministry together. We're looking at this as a step forward, not as a thing of saying, well, we're just giving up, and that's a defeatist mentality, and not something that we want to really focus on, but to know that these are some steps that we would have to go through as part of this transaction that might take place with your approval, and we can't do it without your approval. And so that's why your vote is important. That's why we're going through this process and trying to make sure that everybody is on the same page. Then the question came up and saying, do we have to go through membership class? Because part of what we were saying as going through this, even our leaders at New Life, that we would be kind of stepping down in a way. Our church council, our elders, all our members coming down and entering into a membership process at New Hill. And what that looks like, I would say it's less of going to you're not going there to try to get approved to become a member of New Hill. Think of it more like this. The way it makes sense to me is to think, if I was a kid, I was getting transferred to a new school district, and I'm going to join a new school. I'm going to go through orientation. You know, when I went to high school, I went through orientation. I went to middle school, I went to orientation. And when I went to college, you go through these things so you can learn how things are done, learn what's expected of you, learn how to do things, learn what gets you in trouble, or how to succeed, or where you can get help. When you go through a membership process, think of it more as an orientation at New Hill, so they can get to know you, you can get to know them. So their process is a lot simpler than what we've had at New Life in the past. So theirs is more like a Saturday morning class, like a few hours of getting to know one another. So we're looking at these things here and saying, why would I want to do that? Well, I want to know what's going on. If I start a new job, I want to go to orientation. I want to know, in our case, we know where the bathrooms are. We know where the kitchen is. We don't need a tour of the building. But we do want to get an idea of, who are these people in detail? What is their mission for ministry? What is their vision? How do we come alongside? How do I, if I have an idea, and how do I approach the elders with these ideas? How do things get done? How do we do ministry together? That's the kind of things that we should be thinking about. I mean, hopefully you might have other questions in that regard. So we're looking at this here. Hopefully you've had a chance to pray, a chance to talk with your friends, your fellow brothers and sisters in Christ, and we hope and pray that however you're led in this whole thing, that you're comfortable with voting. I would encourage you to vote. Don't just sit this one out, because this is a big one. If there are people that are definitely saying no, they don't want this to go through, if you don't vote at all, that gives percentage-wise, the no votes a greater weight, greater influence. If you do want it to go through, please vote for it. But don't be afraid of taking this step. Don't be afraid with offending anyone either. If you truly think this idea is terrible, I think this is the worst idea I have ever heard. Who ever thought of such a thing? Why would we do so? If that's how you feel and you genuinely feel, vote your heart. Put a note in there. Write a letter to the elders and let us know. Or if you think we've gone beyond our bounds and we shouldn't do this without a congregational meeting, a proper one in person, then let us know. We want to know what your heart is. We want to know where you are in this whole process, and hopefully, one way or another, we're going to, get on the same page together, to be of one accord, and to move forward in whichever way, whichever direction the Lord wants this to go. That's what we're looking for. Here's an opportunity. Do we want to go down this path? That's why your vote is important. And we're prepared, however this may go. But personally, at this point, I'm hearing good things. But in the end, we know that whatever decision is made, it's all going to be a good thing, because the Lord is on his throne. He is sovereign, and his will be done. And I pray that the Lord would bless you, and he would help guide you and guide us all into all wisdom at this point in time. May Lord help us all. It's in your name we pray, Christ Jesus. Amen.